Tell us about Make Sense. We got you in this morning to talk about kind of online harm for young people, and you've just done some very official sounding oral submissions to Parliament and in front of select committees, and this is really your area of expertise, right?
Yeah, so I work in advocacy around online harm, particularly focused on children and young people. And I co-founded Make Sense with Jo Robertson, who you've probably had in here before.
Yeah, we get her in every few weeks.
She's
actually.
amazing.
Yeah.
She's a porn researcher and a therapist. So we started our advocacy work 3 years ago because we wanted to really highlight the gaps that we could see systemically in how online harm is approached and where the gaps lie, because the more we got into it, the more shocked we actually were as parents and as educators of just the lack of robust policy and legislation to actually keep our kids safe online. We both work with parents, we've worked with kids for many years in different roles, and I think there is often an assumption that things are under control. Someone's got something sorted. And the more we delve into this work, there are some really good things happening, don't get me wrong, but in terms of a systemic approach to how we deal with online harm, there's some significant gaps, and we're really concerned about that.
We spoke, Bjorn, in his intro to you, said you're an educator, you're a former school teacher, but you're also a parent. So where was this idea born from to make this happen, make sense?
Yeah, so Jo's a good friend of mine, and I've asked her a lot of questions. I think we're both curious people, and we, have a kind of sociological lens. We both studied politics and sociology. I'm doing my master's in public policy, and I come from that teaching background where I've kind of seen how kids engage online with their phones and what they're kind of exposed to. And, having kids myself, I've got a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old, and I've just been really concerned about the access to content and behaviours that are kind of escalating online. And so I've asked her a lot of questions because she's got an incredible background in research and workforce development. And we kind of, I guess, when we were chatting, we realised that if parents knew about the significant gaps that were happening with access to content, they'd be really shocked.
Yep.
And I've also worked in the PR space for 10 years, so we decided to combine forces and to let parents know where the gaps actually lie. And we've had a lot of support, and parents are really shocked, and they really want to see change in this space.
You seem like you're right in the perfect lane for everything you're talking about. With the online stuff, I mean, every generation is ill-equipped to deal with the problems of the generation coming after them, right? Because they didn't experience it in the same kind of way. Technology changes so quickly. Do you think a lot of parents would be very surprised to see what kids have access to online?
Yes.
Is it just a total lack of understanding about what's actually out there that people can so easily come across?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is a lack of understanding. And I think culturally we do this thing where we go, everyone's got phones because, our kids tell us that everyone in their class has phones, so they need a phone, or we see that everyone's on phones and, everyone's on Snapchat or TikTok. So we kind of do this thing where we think, oh, okay, so that must be normal. And that must be appropriate, or that must be safe because everyone's doing it. But we don't actually take the time to look into it ourselves and sign up into the app as a 13-year-old and do our homework. We have high trust.
Yep.
And that's what I really encourage parents is if your child wants to go onto TikTok or Snapchat or Discord, sign up yourself as a 13-year-old and do some exploring before you give them access, because that high trust is really problematic because there's some really significant harms that can occur on these platforms.
Bjorn mentioned there technology's always changing.
It is.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
And it's moving really, really quickly. I get a sense, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's moving so quick that does it feel like in your line of work you're trying to catch your tail here? You're on the back end trying to catch up where it's just continuously moving. So where are the holes that you feel like you're filling at the moment that you can catch up?
Yeah, so I think from a high level, from a macro level, we don't have robust legislation in New Zealand that's holding platforms to account and, ensuring that they're designing platforms with safety at the forefront. So there's significant gaps. We have a piece of legislation that we kind of rely on to manage content, and it was set up in 1993. So that was kind of
should be still
pre-internet.
good.
Yeah.
I think that would still be a highly useful
Yeah,
document.
so I was like, that's cool. The Classification Office manage that, and they're an amazing team. The Chief Censor's amazing, but they're focusing on classifying illegal, objectionable content. So kind of content outside of that isn't dealt with. And really the focus is on child sexual abuse material, so the extreme end, and terrorism content. We've also got another piece of legislation, the Harmful Digital Communications Act 2015, and that allows for people who have been harmed online through bullying or maybe stalking, they can make a complaint and NetSafe can take that to the police. So that is it's a good piece of legislation, but it's quite narrow and focused on individual post-harm. So we need a robust system, we need multi-agency approach. We just, there's many gaps. So as parents, we have to really step in here.
Talking about your work advocating for protecting kids online, and you just did a very official sounding oral submission to a select committee. Is that intimidating at all when you're in front of like politicians?
Oh my gosh. It is so intimidating because you're around politicians and experts, and there's like 10 MPs looking at you ready to ask you questions. I was probably shaking for about 3 hours. I acted like I was all good, but I was definitely shaking.
Is there parameters on what you have to work towards? How long does it have to be?
They do give you a time frame. We got given 10 minutes, so we allocated 5 minutes to our speech and then 5 minutes to question time.
Wow. And so,
it's intense. You're trying to get a lot of information across in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, words per minute. Got to be very careful with it, right?
But the thing is
I'd be terrible.
You do a written submission, you would.
You'd be hopeless.
They'd be like, time.
Wrap this guy up.
And he would have only done his introduction.
I know. Well, tell us, what are you calling for the government in terms of like legislation? You talked about the act that we've got from 1993, super outdated. Obviously, the internet didn't even really exist back then. So how's that going to work for protecting kids online these days? What are you calling for? And you did say before off air, you've got some grim statistics that you said, I'll probably skip over those. But I think you shouldn't. Maybe not the worst of the worst, but just to give parents or anyone that's listening a reality check as to what young people are seeing online and at what age.
Yeah.
Like, can you give us a bit of a scope as to
absolutely.
the situation that we're actually in?
So we know that 2/3 of teenagers are seeing pornography online, and 69% of that pornography, of those viewers, have seen violence and aggression. So they're seeing people having kind of violent sexual experiences and women enjoying that. 72% have seen non-consensual activity. Almost 1 in 10 young people under 18 are being exposed to illegal content, so things like child sex abuse material. And I've heard personally many stories of kids seeing that type of content and being really affected by that. We've got grooming on Snapchat increased 550% from 2021 to 2023. That's from the New Zealand Police. 2 years? Yeah, in New Zealand. We've got 7 in 10 teens experience unwanted digital communication. They have in the past year. So that's, things like bullying or inappropriate content that they've been shared. So we really need a reset in how we're approaching tech.
And what age is this sort of first starting for kids?
Yeah. So average age, 1 in 4 kids see pornography by the age of 12 years old. That data comes from the Classifications Office 7 years ago, so we can safely assume that that's reduced.
Does your data tell you the signs that parents can maybe look out for? Because it's very obviously secretive with young people.
Yeah.
But what are parents looking out for? And maybe some practical tips for parents?
I think that's a really good question, because I think it can be really hard to know what the signs are. Like there's some obvious ones, like kids being withdrawn or spending more time in their bedrooms, being really reactive, explosive, moody. But then, when our kids are going through their teenage years, they often have those feelings or behaviours anyway.
Yeah.
So the really important thing as parents is we just need to ask questions. On Friday, we sent out just some information on our Make Sense Instagram page to let people know to talk to their kids about the Charlie Kirk shooting, because we were hearing from teachers that kids were telling them they'd seen it and that it was being shared around, and it was really upsetting. And a couple of parents messaged us and said, thank you for sharing that. I wouldn't have asked. My kid came home and I asked them if they'd seen that video, and they had, and they were really upset about it. And I don't think they would have told me if I hadn't asked. So I think we've got to get into the habit of having conversations with our kids and asking questions, because I talk with my kids a lot about online safety. My kids are kind of stuffed because of the work I do. We talk a lot. They're like, oh, we're going to talk about porn again.
Yeah.
But, I'm often surprised by the things that come out when I ask them questions that they haven't volunteered to tell me, but it's come out through questions that I've asked. So be curious. We don't want to come at our kids with judgment. We just want to be like, what's going on for you? What's happening? What are your friends up to? What are you seeing? Man, that must be really hard.
This is really good for me to hear, because Charlie Kirk's shooting, I didn't once think to have a chat to my kids about that. Never once. But as you explained it, it just makes sense that I need to be a little bit more curious around certain things. I chat to them, but there's so much more I can do. So thanks for that encouraging advice.
Yeah, that's all good.
I think too, maybe people struggle to understand the volume of this kind of content, like the harmful stuff you were talking about. It's not just in a few select kind of areas. Like I know, Instagram, these different platforms will have some sort of flagging system or filtering, but it's not nearly catching any of this harmful stuff, right? Like the amount of it that is online is just continuous and never ending. The legislation that you're talking about, trying to get the government to step into or write and put forward, where are we at with that? And do other countries kind of have a roadmap? Is anyone else doing better than us that we're like, that'd be a good place to look with what we could hope for?
Yeah, so it makes sense. We're really advocating for a national strategy that focuses on online safety, that has kind of a multi-agency approach. So at the moment, we have 2 bits of legislation, different agencies kind of are responsible for different parts of legislation, so it's a little bit complicated. We want a national strategy. We want an online Children's Safety Act that's specific to children, so that platforms have some accountability in how they're designing their platforms. If they're engaging with children, they need parameters of what's appropriate and what isn't, and then they need to be held to account if they're breaking the rules. So we'd love to see a children's online commissioner leading the charge, and we'd like to see a regulator that can enforce this act and put consequences or fines in place if platforms aren't doing what they're meant to do. The UK, Australia, Canada, the EU, they're all kind of they're years ahead of us. They've got some really good, robust legislation in place. They've got enforcement mechanisms, and we can lean on them. When it comes to policy, we often look at comparable countries, and we can lean on them to emulate the policy that they've got in place. And we also need that international partnership too, because we are a small country. So when we partner with bigger countries that are doing similar work, that gives us more power. We already have some international partnerships here in New Zealand with like Interpol and NCMEC. So it's already a kind of thing that we do. So yeah, I would like to see a robust systemic approach. Education is key. Education for parents, education for kids. But we can't just put it all on kids to learn how to be resilient and be stakeholders of their own autonomy online. Absolutely, we need to protect them.
I was just going to ask as my last one for you this morning, Holly. Parents who'll be listening, and me included in this one, they feel like they've let their kids down. By some of the things that you've said with the engagement of their kids. But what's something that you can leave them with that's a little bit encouraging for where we're at the moment?
Yeah, I think the online space has escalated really quickly, and we haven't talked about it, and we haven't known what's happening. And over the last 5 years, I've seen harms with content, contact, conduct, and contract. Those are the kind of 4 Cs. I've seen that's increased rapidly over these last 5 years. So as parents, we now in an era this year particularly, where we're talking publicly a lot more about what's happening online. So that's great. When we're talking about what's happening and we're understanding it more, that's when we can put changes into place. So I think as parents, we're just all learning as we go. Parenting is a tough gig, man. And we're not digital natives. We're trying to keep up. But what we want is to really lean into the influence we have over our kids. That means connecting with them, spending time with them, having conversation, being curious, asking them questions, sharing our experiences, but also putting boundaries in place on tech. We don't have to give them free-for-all access to everything. We don't want to lock it down because we live in the real world, but keeping phones and devices out of bedrooms at night, or out of bedrooms full stop, but especially at night, and having some kind of time limits on how long they can spend online, because we don't want them to lose that ability to connect face-to-face, hanging out, play card games. Play ball games, go for walks,
Gotcha.
go do stuff
Noughts
together.
and crosses.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Old school.
Yeah.